and I've learned a lot already, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. I, of course, want to extend my thanks to the two presenters. It was great to read their papers in advance, but also to see the images now was very provocative and quite compelling for me. So as I said, I'll try to be quick about this. I'll just make a few comments about both papers, really raise some questions about the papers, and then in the end, I just want to suggest a couple of possible ways that we might think of them together and press some questions for these two presenters and the rest of our speakers. So, Jason Stuber's paper surveys a vast amount of historical material that gives us a picture of what pre-World War II exhibition practices that formed the influential notions of Asian art in Europe and America. And I was especially struck by the prominence of institutions outside of conventional academia in the story, and I think this is a good, very useful thing for us to pursue. These groups clearly had scholarly aspirations, but they were also deeply invested in financial and nationalistic concerns that affected the way they structured and became understood as Asian art. And I think Jason's schema helps us pinpoint some of those factors that may have been at play. We see in his account a truly popular swell of interest in Chinese art. I had no idea the numbers, the hundreds of thousands that would have been seeing these, and so we need to pay very close attention to cultural forces that were at play in the early 20th century. And I had a few specific comments on details of the paper. For example, in part one, oh, there he is. You outlined some of the exhibitions of Asian art in Europe in the late 20th and late 19th and early 20th century. And I'm curious why London was so prominent. What factors would have brought it to the core there? I mean, just on a level of twice as much in many ways. And you mentioned a little bit about the United States, but to what degree did the United States play a significant role in this story, especially through the 1930s, not just in that earlier 1916 exhibition in San Francisco? And in part two of the presentation, we heard about displays of modern and contemporary Asian art together. And I wonder if you could unpack, if we have time, some of the specific works and artists that were either included or excluded, and what that might tell us about the different cultural agendas at play there. And finally, I appreciated your comments on Noguchi and putting this current exhibition in that context. And so I'm wondering about, or I think we can explore perhaps in our discussion some of the ways that an artist is a kind of curator, how they make certain selections, how they construct a certain exhibition of self, of nation, all these things, these same factors that are at play. And I think we might see that certainly in Noguchi and to a certain extent Shibashir's work as well. And before I move on to Spiker's paper, I would like to highlight one more point raised by Stuber's presentation, the use of terms like East and West. I feel like there's a sort of dance around that will use these terms and then try and then suppress them. And we see in all of the papers some of the dangers and complexities of using them, East and West and the Orient or whatever terms you want to use. Now, as historically situated period terms, they may be quite relevant and useful. However, the continuing reliance, at least in sort of more popular press of these conceptual categories, it reifies them and implies they have more stable substance than they actually do. So as a museum professional, especially for Jason, I'm wondering how you imagine trying to get beyond these terms of East and West, that whereas the academic community may be finding ways to shift these boundaries or complicate them, how you both play into and undercut them in your own exhibitions. So turning to Christina's paper, Christina Spiker's paper, is a really exciting examination of a much neglected, for me, much neglected history of Ainu art, at least certainly from the perspective of art history. I hope that she and other scholars will continue to study this material in increasing depth. Her research on the intersections of more contemporary ideas of anthropology, science, art, colonialism, and scholarship demonstrates the necessity of careful interdisciplinary disciplinary research and the fruitfulness of close analysis of textual and visual discourses. So in her paper, we treated a host of fascinating characters, such as Starr, Matsuura, Betgoro, who course between these different categories. The visual record of the encounters are especially compelling to me, and I'm left wanting to know much more. So, in terms of some specific questions for Christina, first of all, what was the notion of art as a sort of high art, fine arts, important to Starr, and for that matter, Bettigoro? And did Starr make significant distinctions between art and more sort of scientific ethnographic artifact in his collection? And I think you're definitely right to point out ways that internal others radically complicate simplistic notions of East and West. I think that one of the great challenges of your larger project is recovering the voice of people like Bettigoro. And we see you beginning to do that here, but what other scholarly resources might you pursue to hear more from them? Does the visual record present any special insights or dangers in trying to recover these voices? And lastly, I'd love to know more about Bettigoro's later life. The anecdote you recount at the end from when Starr re-encounters him gives us some hints, but did he and the other Ainu ever recount their experiences in a way that historians have access to? And I think that's an important point. And just as a minor aside with Christina's presentation, I really enjoyed seeing the Prezi being used. I think that's something that it lends itself well to visual presentation, but can often be quite disturbing and vertigo-inducing, so it's great to see it being used well for a compelling and cogent argument. So these two papers cover rather two distinct time periods and bodies of material. Nonetheless, I think they share some common themes that are relevant to our discussion. Let me just suggest two right now. First, the question of canon formation is crucial to both these papers. Stuber explicitly shows how the exhibition considers shaped notions of what Chinese art was and what should be valued in these traditions. Spiker gives us a number of different canons to contend with, including a very interesting canon of ethnicity about what a proper Ainu man would look like and the ways that a nonconformist, like Bettigoro in his own way, how he undercuts those. So given these provocative analyses, what should we, as educators and scholars, do with these canons? Are they to be discarded whole cloth, or should some of the threads be salvaged for some new historical tapestry we might try to weave? And a second point, or second question for both in general, and is the negotiated national identities seem to be key to both these case studies. Spiker gives us many ways to reassess the status of Ainu art in relation to wider notions of so-called Japanese art and modernity in the early 20th century. And Stuber reminds us of the overlapping nationalistic agendas in both Asia and Europe. With the issue of canon formation and its inheritance, I have another question for both of you and our audience in general. As scholars and institutions attempt to move beyond the profound limitations of older national narratives, what are our real alternatives? So with these preliminary and desultory comments, I once again thank our presenters for raising these provocative questions, and I look forward to hearing more from you and your colleagues. Thank you.